Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening, everybody. This is our 48th episode. This program began July 2nd, 2024. So if you have not seen all the shows prior to this one, go back to the beginning and listen. You can listen in pretty much any order, but go back and make sure you pick up all the shows because there's a lot of information here, and information you will not find anyplace else. And as I tell people, tell your friends, and even tell the people you don't like, because maybe they'll like you because you referred this show to them. In the world, first of all, a quick announcement. Next Monday would be June 23rd. And if you're listening to the archives, then listen to the archives. But I'm going to be the guest on Coast to Coast AM with host George Noory. Now, I go back decades with George Noory. I was in the studio in LA at one point, did one show there, actually in the studio with Tom Danheiser, the producer, and George. And that night George was releasing a book. It was called Talking to the Dead. And there's a picture of us, George and myself, and George is holding his book up, and that picture was in the LA Times the next day, because they wanted to tout the fact that they were having guests in the studio. So I went out to, Oaks, I forget the suburb of LA. And late at night in the studio, did a live show. Okay, so anyway, I just want to mention too that I go way back to the early days of Coast to Coast AM. I was a favorite guest of Art Bell. And that was back in the days when there were a few radio shows, big radio shows that covered everything. And of course, Coast to Coast AM now is right up there at the top of the list. The upper maybe 5 in the world in terms of listenership. But back in the day, there were fewer shows. Today, there are hundreds and hundreds of shows, like everybody has a podcast. And so it's harder to be recognized, and this leads into my next point. But by the way, just so you remember, next Monday, June 23rd, Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, I'll be the guest. And this brings in another topic that I've been noticing this. And I'm like everybody else. I search some of these shorts, and sometimes just to relax. I'm busy with a lot of things. I just want to kind of, do something, divert my mind for a few minutes. So I'll go through these shorts, and like YouTube shorts, etc. And they're like some as short as 10 seconds and some up to a minute or so. But what I've been noticing is there are a growing number of these channels, and they're like Susie Q Space Girl, or that's not a real one, but it's kind of like that. And then there's these gee whiz people in there like, whoa, did you know this scientific fact? And it's what I call gee whiz science, and it's to wow the public. But the underlying theme is NASA rah-rah standard science, and it's a subtle way of programming the public into believing all of the baloney science they're trying to pawn off in you, the public. Now, the other thing about these is obviously many of them are AI generated, because you can tell, because the script or the text to voice is very poorly done. One I saw, the guy was saying the word quasar, And anybody that knows anything about astronomy or astrophysics knows that it's pronounced quasar, so it's clearly an AI voice. And it sounds like this real guy, and some of these people, most of them are without a face. They're just a voice. But a lot of graphics, high-level graphics, which means someone is putting a lot of time and effort and money, because graphics, believe me, take a lot of money to put these together specifically for a short program that you would find on the internet, the shorts. So somebody's putting a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of content. So this content is coming out of NASA and the standard space science industries to try and promote this and program you, the public, into believing the, like I say, the standard science BS that they're pawning off on the public, what I call Tier 2 science, the Neil deGrasse Tyson science. Tier 2, he's actually what I consider Tier 3 science, because he doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't really do research. He just does podcasts and what we call outreach. Outreach is where the agencies, especially government agencies, take a person like that. He's got a PhD, he's qualified, he's studied his book learning, he's got his book learning down, what we call textbook geniuses. A textbook genius is somebody that's got all the textbook material down, can repeat it verbatim. And that's in a way that the public will understand. So at any rate, there's this plethora, this absolute blanket coming out and it just dominates. If you are somebody that's interested in shorts, and of course this is all AI driven, so if you have an interest in science like I do, clearly they're going to keep feeding you these science shorts. But like I say, they're AI driven, they're very glossy, very high amount of graphics, animation, and to go along with the voice. So somebody's putting a lot of time and money into this. And when I say blanket coverage, what that means is that they're flooding the internet with this so that you cannot get in a word in edgewise. Okay, so at any rate, just be aware of that as you are surfing the internet, that it's really highly controlled, highly, highly, highly controlled. And I'm an independent scientist myself. I've always been an independent scientist. And I'm considered in the real world of science, excuse me, and with the public, and a lot of times I'm introduced as a Tier 1 scientist. And the reason for that is because I've done real scientific research. I have peer-reviewed published papers, and a history of presentation in scientific meetings at Tier 1 level. That means what I call military science, where they talk to me or I present at closed military meetings and when I say military, it's Tier 1 science. They don't publish in peer-reviewed journals. They don't, their names are not public. And so part of my scientific world is in that world, and I'm independent. I've never signed contracts. I don't have gag orders. And so I do my science, and they realize that I'm cutting edge on probably about 15 different fields, including archaeology, anthropology, prime numbers, mathematical analysis, not to mention all the space science things that I do. Okay, so anyway, that's to put that into perspective. And we notice too that this show is being shadow banned. In other words, it's being pushed down, and they can do that. I mentioned this a few weeks ago, where they're promoting certain people, and I call these street people, kind of like, for example, one guy. This is crazy. I mean, here's the guy that's getting a lot of time today. He's been interviewed on Tucker Carlson, representing so-called science, the alternative science, the controlled opposition. And his claim, the way he got trained, was by reading science fiction and taking LSD. That's his own story. And I'm like, this is who they're promoting as being one of the top figures. And there again, that's just total disinformation coming at you, because they're pushing these people, and that's controlled opposition. And then you have the white hats that come riding in from the anthropology or archaeology world to try and set the record straight, and they're just as comical as the controlled opposition. And this is what's being pushed onto you, the public. It's in your face on the internet. Okay, well, I don't want to dwell on that too much, but you have to be really tuned these days when you get on the internet. It's the Wild West out there, and you are the victim, believe me, the day you set foot on the internet. Okay. Okay, a little bit of an energy review for hydrogen. Where is hydrogen today? And hydrogen is something that doesn't need government subsidies, and it's grown up as an industry without government subsidies. There is a thing that if you produce green hydrogen, that you can get, I think it's up to $3 a kilogram paid to the producer of the hydrogen. Not the person who builds the equipment, not the person who, well, let's just make it simple. The person or company that actually produces the hydrogen for the market, and there is a market right now, a growing market, and it's something that I happen to be in myself in the background. And it's a market that a lot of investors don't understand. I'll give you an example. When digital cameras came along, another example when the personal computer came along. IBM had its mainframe business in legacy, what we call legacy computing. The mainframe computer, everybody hooked into the mainframe computer with relatively dumb or relatively stupid by today's standards terminals hooked into the mainframe computer and centralized computing. And IBM, in its all of its glory in the day of computing, or Control Data, or DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and all the other ones, did not see the PC revolution coming. So you had companies that were very low in the market, like Hewlett-Packard, HP, who are still around today building personal computers, saw this and said, this is the future. I worked in that industry for a period of 25 years in the telecommunications industry and in the computer industry. And I saw the transition because I worked for a company where we built front-end processors for IBM mainframes and built networks, large networks, worldwide networks. And but the point is that the big corporations, the IBMs, the Control Datas, the DECs, did not see the PC world coming. Let me give you another example. When the digital photography came in, Kodak was the dominant figure in photography. The film, you had Agfa and other companies, European companies that were big in Europe, etc. But Kodak was the worldwide provider of film, literally film for all purposes, for commercial, for private use, etc. And Kodak also made cameras. They did not see the digital revolution coming. And so, at any rate, the situation today is that the big players like Shell Oil is converting methane in natural gas into hydrogen and selling it on the market. Those are the big providers of hydrogen for the market today, but it's not green. It's a horrifically polluting. It's actually more polluting in terms of the wicked CO2 molecule, which is, by the way, a farce. But anyway, in terms of green hydrogen is hydrogen that is produced with renewable energy. And so you could either do it with solar, you could do it with wind, or hydro, for example. But the big winner in the future is going to be hydrogen produced from the wind. The Japanese recently, in the last couple of weeks, announced that they had a program that had been running for years, actually years, and they just announced it publicly. They had a barge, an ocean-going barge that was a sailing barge. In other words, it moved around with sails, and it had wind generators on board that converted seawater into hydrogen, and they were able to deliver their very first load to port, to market. So this is, of course, where I've been going. If you want to look at my webpage, jmccwing.com, I talk about that. But the so a little bit of review on hydrogen. The hydrogen industry is well. Oh, by the way, the Japanese used a dry storage technique for hydrogen, and that is the future also. We typically think of hydrogen as a compressed gas being delivered in tanks where they under high pressure in liquid form. In hydrogen, it would be very similar technology as natural gas or propane, which is a very stable industry, very safe, very well known. And it turns out that hydrogen itself is really a docile atomic element. It mixes with oxygen, but you need to ignite it. You have to combust it, put it in a combustible situation. But there are things called fuel cells. There's two ways, basically, today to use hydrogen. One is internal combustion engine. You use it just like gasoline, or you can mix it with gasoline in an internal combustion engine or with diesel. It has the specific impulse for hydrogen engines is super high, and so the end result is that hydrogen in internal combustion engines is a way of the future. There are car makers right now who are building engines that can burn 4 different types of fuel: natural gas, propane, natural gas, gasoline, diesel, or hydrogen. Can you imagine an engine? You can burn any fuel, or bio also. So you can burn any fuel in these engines, and that's where it's going, because hydrogen is not going to be commercially available for the consumer, for the average guy on the street with your car, for quite a while. The infrastructure is just not there, and that's what's lacking with hydrogen. Also, the production of green hydrogen at a reasonable price. But all of these things are being developed by private sources, private industry, etc. So anyway, that's a quick review of hydrogen, and it's coming. The hydrogen revolution is coming. But the big providers and the big investors don't understand it at all. Just like the personal computer and IBM, just like the digital photography and Kodak, who had chemicals and film where you had to develop the film, you had to send it in or do it in your own laboratory like I used to do. I used to develop my own film, Kodak Ektachrome, and I develop it and do the reverse processes to get negatives out of Kodachrome, which was used in the movie industry, by the way. Anyway, on and on. But the hydrogen, I would say in 10 years, you're going to really see a lot more of it. And it's not going to be because the government figured it out, because right now the government, the big countries of the world are going after petroleum. They're still on this petroleum kick. And it's, but anytime the government gets involved, you can probably bet it's going to get all messed up. That's a safe bet. So maybe it's a good thing the government is not involved, because these companies have to be lean and mean and produce a product based on success, not government subsidies. Just talking about wind generation in general, the wind industry was heavily subsidized, and that subsidy is going away with the Trump administration. They're doing away with the subsidies for wind, electric vehicles, for solar, and those industries are going to collapse under their own weight because they've depended on government subsidies. I think the big, well-developed companies like Tesla will survive. They will just adapt. And like going from the horse buggy to the automobile, the Model T, there's been a lot of growing pains in all of these industries throughout history. But hydrogen is going to be the future, and the Japanese are going whole hog on hydrogen. The Chinese have built a cross-country pipeline for hydrogen. So that's where they're going. And it's a very interesting fuel because very high energy content in hydrogen. And I want to stress the fact that dry hydrogen storage, this is what the Japanese were using. There's other companies in the US that are developing dry hydrogen storage techniques. And what is that? Well, typically you think of hydrogen being stored like in ammonia or in other chemicals or under pressure. Hydrogen by itself, molecular hydrogen under pressure in liquid form, and it's 7,000 psi, really high pressure to get it in a liquid form so you can put it in an automobile or a truck. But one of the nice things about hydrogen is that you can use it in diesel engines. With a little bit of a manifold conversion, you can use it in a diesel engine. Because the gasoline engine, the hydrogen burns too hot, but it has a lot of power. And so unlike electrical vehicles, where you have to have this massive battery pack and it takes so long to charge, and there's a lot of electrical charging involved from the grid, and the grid capacity is just not there to support large fleets of electric vehicles. And today, electrical vehicles are being charged from nuclear power and coal and natural gas. So you'd be better off just to burn those fuels in your car, especially the natural gas. So anyway, a little bit of an update on hydrogen, where that is today. But I would say in 10 years, you're going to see a lot more activity with hydrogen. Changing subjects here a little bit. Some very interesting things going on in the world of ocean protection. Now, since man started seafaring and lived by the ocean, which is most of the existence of the human race, they've been fishing and using aquatic sea life and freshwater sea life as a source of food. But it's getting to the point you have 7 billion people in the world, and the demand for food is growing. And so the movement to protect the oceans is underway. The UN is spearheading this. There was a conference, international conference I believe it was in Nice, France, this past week, sponsored by the United Nations. 60 leaders. Now these are presidential style leaders and representatives, high-level representatives from over 60 countries in the world, meeting to discuss this issue. They also have funding that they put in, and apparently that is like the United Nations or anything else. They're trying to add funding to study the issues and organize, basically write statements or, basically affirmations, I think would be the best way to term these documents that they write up, because they have no teeth. There's no legal binding, and much of this has to do with international waters. They just want people to comply. And at a time when the United States is trying to open up international water mining of the ocean floor, there's vast resources, of course, on the ocean floor. Not to mention oil, which is something that you have to wonder if oil came from fern forests and dinosaur bones, how did the oil get out in the middle of the ocean? And of course, oil, I've talked about this last week, oil does not come from fern forests or dinosaur bones, nor does it come from abiotic sources. But at any rate, I agree with this. the protection of the oceans. But the next topic is what really is the solution. And if you look at just pure economics in terms of fishing and overfishing of the ocean, what happens? Somebody gets a boat, they go out fishing, they make more money, they go, gee, if I had a bigger boat, I could make more money. So now you need help, you need to pay people. You have a bigger boat, it takes more of the catch to pay just for the boat and the operation of the boat, but you're taking out much more and you're producing much larger volume of product for the market. And eventually, if you overfish and overtake from a source, like say Pacific salmon or Atlantic salmon or some other lobster, whatever it is, then it won't be economically viable anymore. You're not going to fish them to extinction because it's simply not economically viable. And so the businesses that cannot control the amount of catch that they take will simply go under because of economic reasons. So the economic factors are what really control it, not government laws or sanctions or accords or affidavits or anything else. But what happens now, and this is the next big story on this topic, is that world farming of seafood is on the rise. And it turns out it's very interesting. You would think they'd be using sea-based farms, but the majority of fish and sea creatures that are being farmed commercially today are in fresh water. And why is that? Is because it's much simpler to, you have a source of fresh water, you have the species that you're growing, and it's much easier to control them. I know for a while salmon, for example, was highly toxic because of the chemicals they used in the production of the farms, in the growth, because they had a lot of problem with fungus, with a lot of bacteria, and so they used a lot of chemicals to raise. But now they're getting it down to the point where you go to the store to buy salmon or trout or the other varieties of trout, of salmon, etc. Steelhead, for example, is one of the ones they're raising now very successfully. They're using less and less chemicals because the demand in the market is for chemical-free food. So this has been an evolution. But right now, around 90% of the seafood on the world market is being grown in farms. And it might be higher than that. These are estimates. But there again, these are economic factors that are driving this, and it's a huge market. Just like vegetables or anything else, if it's profitable and you can do it on a concentrated stage, and you can do it in today's market, the consumer is demanding chemical-free processing and growing, and it can be done. Although there's still, so GMO, organic is the big term everybody's going after, but it's still GMO. Most of the products grown today are genetically modified. The DNA for the plants came from a laboratory. And to me, just to be clear, it would be good to live in a world of pure organic non-GMO, and that is growing. Once again, because people are recognizing that the GMO, non-GMO factor is very important in the source of food. So anyway, the large portion, especially of seafood, and that's the source of protein, is coming from, and you find, for example, eggs. There's a push where people will pay more, literally almost double in some cases, for organic, free range, and of course these terms get watered down because free range used to mean the chickens just were running around on the range. But there's different ways to get around that, and so it's not really free range. When you buy free range eggs or chickens, they're really not running around the prairie like it would imply. but the movement is towards much better quality food in larger quantities. And so you find places like Costco, where, wholesale supplier to the general public, where you buy in bulk and quantities, and much lower than the grocery store pricing. And they're very particular about quality. They're very tuned to non-GMO products, or products that don't have fillers or chemicals or color chemicals or whatever. And so including with soaps, laundry soaps, biodegradable. So the world is becoming a much better place in terms of products for the public. But I wanted to get those two stories in, discussing the fact that there's a great need to protect the world oceans from overtaking, fishing, and also the rise of the commercial farms and the improvement in their products. Very important. So you can live, let me just put it into perspective. 10 years ago, this did not exist. There were a couple farms maybe in the Midwest. I knew a guy on an Iowa farm. Unfortunately, he passed away. But I was involved in this myself. I went to a seed store in, this was in Iowa, and general seed store, and I said, I want to buy oats and I want to buy some corn in bags, in bulk, 50-pound bags or whatever they were, 100-pound bags, I can't remember, big bags, like you would buy for the farm. And so I said, I want oats, wheat, corn. And the guy looked at me, and he knew I was not a farmer, because he was familiar with all of his farm clientele in the area. He said, but are you going to eat this for human consumption? I said, yeah, I want to store it for emergency. He said, well, if you eat this corn and that I have here and grains, it'll kill you. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, the cows they can eat it and it won't kill them. But if you ate this, it would. And so anyway, then I got to talking to him, and he said, well, if you're interested, I have some corn seed here. It's a very rare corn seed. And that spring happened to be a flood in the Midwestern states of Iowa, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And he explained that there was a program, the university agriculture departments around these 5 states were trying to get non-GMO, non-hybrid corn on a large scale, to the point where they were growing seed, and this was their final season where they could finally produce enough seed, because every year they would take the best of the crop and turn it into seed corn, and they had farmers literally growing this as their crop. And it's called dent corn. Dent, because when the corn dries, on the end of the kernel, there's a little dent in it, forms a little dent, and that's where the term dent corn comes from. It's like the corn of the 1800s, or you would have found it in the South or around the Midwest in the 1800s. So this was a traditional non-GMO, non-hybrid, organic, completely organically grown corn. And they had it to the point where they had hundreds of farms growing this in the Midwest, to the point where the next season they were going to have enough for wide-scale distribution and to start replacing Monsanto GMO corn seed. And if I've been in, for example, a little island in Hawaii called Lahaina, is a place where Monsanto grows their corn seed. And they have places around the world. And I was visiting Lahaina as a tourist, and I went to a vegetable shop, and I looked, and they had all this produce there, and I was buying that, and I said, I'd like some corn. And they said, well, we don't have any corn here. I said, well, what do you mean? There's fields and fields of corn. What do you mean you don't have corn? You don't sell any. And the guy says, oh no, that's Monsanto seed corn. You can't touch that. Don't even go near it. They'll shoot you. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's pretty friendly for the Hawaiian Islands. And then I started looking, and it was posted, like, do not cross this line, do not go there. And that's where Monsanto would grow huge amounts of its corn. So you can imagine if you cover the United States and then the world, producing enough seed every year to produce the corn, just the seed is a big operation, worldwide operation of Monsanto. And so anyway, this group of universities in the Midwestern states, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and maybe Indiana and Ohio also. But they were growing this, and that spring there was a flood, and it all died in that spring flood. And the only thing that was left of that was a pallet that this guy had in the back. And he said, here, I'll show it to you. And there was about a pallet. Maybe there were 2 pallets a pallet, I don't know. But there might have been 30, 40 bags of this corn seed. And it was very edible corn. It was corn, dent corn, but it was of seed quality. So I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, what are you going to do with that? And he said, oh, we're going to grind it up for chicken feed. And I'm like, what? You can't be serious. I said, I'll buy it. So I bought everything he had there, and I had it shipped up to a place where I could distribute it and have it packaged into little bags. And I went and I sold this on my webpage, the jmcannyscience.com webpage. And I was on radio shows and on my own radio show announcing this and promoting it, and I sold it all. And the smallest lot was an envelope with 250 seeds, because this was to promote this corn so that individuals out there could get it and grow it, this relic dent corn. And then the next package was, I think, 1,000 seeds, and then maybe 5,000 seeds in a bag, and I sold this. Well, I had a farmer in Iowa buy it, and he started growing this. And he was right next to a farm with Monsanto. The Monsanto farm, which was a commercial farm, came in and destroyed him. But anyway, this guy eventually died. Unfortunately, he died very young. Anyway, I distributed this corn seed, and still to this day, somebody will write back and say, are you still selling the corn seed? I say no, but the people will send me a photo of the corn that they grew with this, and they have ears like this. I mean, giant ears of corn, fields of this, and that's the result of my effort to save that corn seed from being ground up into chicken feed. And so that's still out there and being propagated. But like I say, 1880s corn seed, relic corn seed, non-GMO, non-hybrid, and completely organic. And so anyway, I wanted to mention that, but the point is that there are efforts in the food industry to reach that level of quality. And most European countries have outlawed Monsanto. It started with Poland, and I think the Czech Republic and some of the other countries outlawed Monsanto, and then it spread. And so the United States cannot export corn into most of these countries because a lot of the corn in the United States is Monsanto GMO corn. And it's not because of some trade war or tariff war. It's possible that Canada is that way also. And then the meat and the dairy products that come from the animals that eat the Monsanto corn cannot be exported to many of these countries also. And so, interestingly enough, honey is another one, where you have Cuba. Interestingly enough, the island of Cuba is one of the world's largest exporters of raw, non-GMO honey. And so, interestingly enough, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I could give a lot more information on this, but the original topic was that the 60 nations got together this past week in France, near Paris, and to discuss the preservation of the oceans. And the economic solution to that is farms for aquatic growth. And this includes, one of the big products also is seaweed. At this point, 30% of the world's seaweed comes from commercially grown farms. And there are other things like, say, oysters that grow on the roots of plants that are out in the ocean. They grow under the waterline. I remember when I had a boat in the Caribbean for a while, sailboat, and we'd go out in the dinghy into the mangroves and eat oysters on a hot day. It was nice and cool in the mangroves, and just eat oysters until you were blue in the face, literally, because that's where they grew. And so, but much of this today is becoming commercialized where they can meet the world demand, the world market. Next topic, by the way, I want to correct something. I said Lahaina, and Lahaina is the little town that burned down in Maui. The island I meant to talk about was Molokai. So the correction is that Molokai is the island I was talking about where Monsanto grows its seed corn, one of the places in the world. And it's the whole west end of Molokai is covered with Monsanto corn. So anyway, next I want to read a letter. Now this, I've been a member of the American Geophysical Union forever. I've been in this industry, science, space science, etc. And my specific specialty is in solar magnetospheric physics. And so it's one of my specialties. I deal with all kinds of things, but officially that's the area of space physics that I am recognized in, where I present regularly, etc. And so I want to read this letter because they're begging for funding. Now that the funding is being cut on a national basis from the White House on down. So I just want to quick read this, and then I'm going to read my reply that I sent back. Okay, let me pull this up here. Okay, so here's the newsletter that went out to the members of the space physics group for solar and space physics and solar physics. Okay, it says, dear colleagues, the President's budget for fiscal year 2026 has now been released. It offers a stark picture for the future of heliophysics in the USA. Both NASA and National Science Foundation face severe and sweeping cuts that impact the entire range of activities that our community performs, from basic research to instrumentation, including both our space-based heliophysics fleet and our ground-based facilities. Similar cuts are expected for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and other agencies based on media reporting. Cuts of the magnitude proposed will stifle the training of new heliophysicists and will largely obviate the bold and forward-looking recommendations of the 2024 National Academy's Solar and Space Physics Decadal Survey. For full details, go here. It's important to stress that these are preliminary budgets, and then he's asking them to go and contact the congressman and then telling them basically how to do that, and begging for Congress to maintain the funding levels, and encouraging them to specifically to go and write and contact their congressman to keep the funding level. Okay, here's my reply. I've been a lifelong member of SPA section of the American Geophysical Union and an independent science. I've never taken government funding. So right there, it's in your face. All these people are begging for government funding. I don't and never have gotten government funding, and I refuse to do it because it completely corrupts science, okay? I'll start over, read this verbatim. I've been a lifelong member of SPA section of the American Geophysical Union and an independent scientist. I've never taken government funding. I stopped presenting many years ago because the meetings are filled with concepts that could not possibly be true. Frankly, the entire funding of all you mentioned below should be canceled, and I will be as vocal as possible about that. Thank God we have someone in the White House that recognizes the quagmire we have in science. What the government-funded science has produced over the past 50 years has been nothing but complete BS. It has not realized the true nature of outer space and is still languishing in such out-of-date concepts as the Big Bang, magnetic reconnection, dirty snowball comets, the core fusion model of the sun, etc., and in fact, everything they are doing. Nuclear fusion is a dream that has never gotten off the ground, and at best is based on silly science. The theories regarding the operation of the sun are so far out of reality that it is pathetic. As for Noah, what a complete fantasy world. They believe that hurricanes are formed from warm water. The largest hurricane in history, called the Perfect Storm, was in the North Atlantic Ocean in icy waters in early November. There have been hurricanes on Mars that has no water at all. Goodness, how blind can they be? So yes, defund the entire mess and start to build a real space program. The current situation is that the entire space community has grown fat, lazy, and no one can get a word in edgewise to counter the dribble that flows out of the peer-reviewed journals. Like squirrels that forgot how to forage, scientists live off the hind tit of the government and beg for nuts. To continue would just promulgate more of the same nonsense. No one can upset the theoretical apple cart, so the best thing that could happen is to get rid of the apple cart, which means cutting the funding. It is a tragic mess, but trying to prop it up and continue funding would be a huge mistake. Maybe it's time for scientists to wake up from their government-supported vacations and get a real job. One last thing, the U.S. is not any kind of leader in science. They are only the leader because everybody wants a piece of the financial pie. Take that away and you have nothing. Now, let me be very specific about an important point. What you are dealing with at the American Geophysical Union meeting is what I call Tier 2 science. Do you realize that there is an entire layer of science, Tier 1, above you that you know nothing about, and who view you as a necessary pawn of garbage science to pawn off garbage science to the unwitting public? So I'm going to read that last line. Now let me be very specific about an important point. What you are dealing with at the American Geophysical Union is what I call Tier 2 science. Do you not realize that there is an entire layer of science, Tier 1, above you that you know nothing about, and who view you as a necessity to pawn off garbage science to the unwitting public? Signed, J. McCanny. And then at the end I say, watch my TV show as I expose the government-funded silly pseudoscience for what it is. Okay, so and this is reality. Scientists do not live in reality because they are completely funded, and I call it scientific vacation. These people fly around the world, this week to Tokyo, next week to Europe someplace, next week to South Africa, all over the world in what I call scientific vacations. They can take their wife, their family, or whatever, and you'll see them, and these are like a vacation. They have excursions that they go on, and when I went on these, I paid my own way, and my badge, which showed my affiliation, so it showed J. McCanny Science, which now is trademarked, by the way. It's a registered trademark, J. McCanny Science, and it's also the LLC that I work under. But it would say J. McCanny Science, independent scientist. And I can't tell you how many times people would come up to me in a meeting. I'd be giving a presentation. Afterwards, they'd come up and they'd look at my affiliation. That's the first thing they do, see your name and affiliation. And they go, independent scientist, what does that mean? And I say, I don't take government funding. And I'm not influenced by government policies or politics or the political nature of science. And they're like, well, how can you do science without government funding? That they'd look at you like you're crazy. My entire career, I have never taken government funding. And so look at the things that I've done. The wing generator, the space science, probably 12 to 15, any one of them could be a Nobel Prize winning discovery regarding space science, physics, astronomy, etc. The work I do on prime numbers, which mathematical analysis, the work on archaeology, identifying the Nazca lines as ancient fractal telecommunications transmission antennas, and actually a grid work of them. And so I'm in all of these different fields where people have worked around for literally decades and decades, in some cases hundreds of years, in the case of the prime numbers, thousands of years without solving them, and I've been at the leading edge of this. That's why they, in Tier 1 science, that's why they consider me a member of the Tier 1 science group, because they are learning from what I'm doing. They've come out and talked to me and they say, they'll tell me, they said, we don't know how you do this. You don't have government funding, you don't have a laboratory, you don't have a staff of physicists. They say, we have the best physicists in the world and they can't figure out what you're doing. They'll tell me that. So, but the problem is government funding. Everybody's afraid to step out of the box. Anyway, okay. I just want to talk about some more silly science here. The annual National Hurricane Prediction came out, and of course we are now in June of this year, and the hurricane season is from June to November, and that's where the bulk of the hurricanes are primarily in the northern hemisphere. And so they come out with this prediction. Let me see if I can pull this up and read it. Okay, here we go. NOAA's outlook for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, which goes from June 1st to November 30th, predicts a 30% chance of near normal season, a 60% chance of above normal season, and 10% chance of a below normal season, which means no matter what happens, they're going to be right. It's not a prediction. It's like saying, well, tomorrow there's a 20% chance of rain and 50% chance of cloudiness and a 10% chance of a little bit of sun. Well, you know, they're going to be right no matter what. This is absolutely silly science. Then they go on to say the agency is forecasting a range of 13 to 19 normal named storms, which have winds of 39 miles per hour or higher. Of those, 6 to 10 of them are forecast to become hurricanes with winds 74 miles an hour or higher, including 3 to 5 major hurricanes, category 3, 4, or 5. And NOAA has a 70% confidence in these ranges. This is meaningless dribble. This is meaningless dribble. They are also saying they're improving the predictions, but this is absolute dribble. And now let me go back a little bit here. Back in 1999, of course, by that time my weather work was well established that hurricanes are driven by electrical currents from the ionosphere, not by warm water. So all of the factors in the computer models of NOAA and the National Hurricane Prediction Center, which is in Boulder, Colorado, and all of these other university-operated or agency-operated hurricane prediction centers, there was a guy who started all of this. His name was William Gray. He was a PhD. He actually ran the first Hurricane Prediction Center developed the computer models that they're still using today. And around 1999, we had a little bit of a confrontation there because of a hurricane named Floyd coming into the east coast of Florida. And after that was over, he got up on a podium and he said, "I quit." He said, "Nothing we're doing has any validity at all. It is," and he realized that they can't use these models they're developing to put people in danger, basically, because that hurricane, if it would have made landfall, it did not. It came up the coast of Florida and then headed out into the ocean again. It missed. But they left the kids in school. They did not evacuate the region. And if that hurricane would have hit Florida, it probably would have killed millions of people, including little kids stuck in their classrooms. Just unbelievable. And I think he finally got conscience, and he got up and he said, none of what they are doing has any validity at all, and he quit with his right-hand man. But this NOAA and the National Hurricane Prediction Center continued to be funded, and it's still funded today, and they come out with this absolute drivel. I mean, what they're saying doesn't make any sense at all. It's not scientific. It has no scientific value at all. So anyway, the hurricanes are not even formed from warm water. It depends on solar electrical activity, not warm water in the ocean. Okay, I want to make a quick comment here about artificial intelligence. It's every company on the planet, "Oh, we got to get AI." I've talked to people in all different kinds of companies, and they're going, "Yeah, their company is putting big money into AI." And especially companies that do research, even legal companies that do legal research, thinking that somehow they're going to get a payback from AI. What they don't understand is that AI is really, really very poorly developed. And like if you call up now, you can't call up any kind of hospital or office of any kind without some kind of AI operator answering for you. And ask you a question, ask your question, and then you ask your question, and it says, "Oh, I don't understand you," or they send you to the wrong place. It's a disaster. AI has already failed because it's very poorly developed. People are not putting the money into it that it really requires. And so I just want to mention that I'm going to be talking a lot more about AI in the future. But most of it is not AI. It is what we call in the computer industry relational databases. In other words, you call up, the AI says hi, you ask your question, they go through a list of things they can answer, and they spit one back to you thinking that that's the match. So at any rate, I'll talk more about AI in the future. Also, I wanted to get in some more discussion of pole shifts. Can do that probably next week. And I'm about out of time here, so just want to remind you, go to the webpage. The jmccsci.com is the short URL for jmcannyscience.com. Go there, and also a new development. My books should be available in mass, possibly by the time this show airs or in the next few days, on Amazon as a large book set in the KDP section of Amazon. Not in the, there will be some more in the, but look for in Amazon under my name, and already there's one book there, The Real History of Man, the Real History of Man and Earth, Myths, Magic, and Mayhem, but the rest of the book should be there soon, and possibly the DVDs also as a library. And always on my webpage, you can always find them there, the J. McCanny Science, short URL, jmccsci.com. And by the way, the water filters, JMCC Water Filters, my 25-year-old water filter company, has a sale on water filters. You can reach all of those from this same page. Good night.
This has been Master of Science with host James McCanney. Join us each week as James will delve into historical figures such as Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the great mathematicians as we explore the history of man, Earth, and our universe as you've never seen it before. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.